There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here's another book haul. This is a Indigenous American novel, House Made of Dawn by N. Scott Momaday. This writer was brought to my attention by Lukash of used to be totally pretentious. I'm sorry, I still don't know your new channel name. Momaday is a Kiowa novelist. First published 1969, and it is about a young Native American, Abel, who's come home to New Mexico from war to find himself caught between two worlds. Please let me apologize at the outset. I'm a bit pressed for time tonight, and I am just going to risk incurring your displeasure that I'm not going to take the time to look up pronunciations, which I usually do. I just literally only have 20 minutes or less to do this video. The day that it was pretty much apparent that Trump's idiotic protests against the Biden win were not going to cause a civil war, he wasn't going to be able to thwart the election, I went out and celebrated and bought two books at the bookstore. One is Testing the Current by William McPherson. The bookstore in Tokyo has a small NYRB books section, and this is the only one there that I didn't know of and that seemed to be new. It's not new, but it was new for that bookstore, and I snatched it up. It is an American novel. William McPherson, born 1933, Pulitzer Prize winning writer. This is his first novel, which was published in 1984. Oh, he was pretty old when this novel was published. This is his debut, and it is set in a Midwestern town in the late 1930s. I had never heard of William McPherson. Opening paragraph. That summer morning, in the distance, Daisy Meyer bent her blonde head over her club, a short iron for the short sixth hole, in effortless concentration on her practice swing. Still engrossed in her projected shot, and seemingly oblivious to the murmurings of the women on the porch, she walked over to the ball, addressed it, and crisply shot it off. For a moment the vision was fixed, motionless, beyond time, left leg straight, right knee bent, arms, shoulders, hips following through, ball suspended in flight, before the breeze stirred the leaves of the elms. Her body unfolded, and the ball descended in its slow arc to the green, where it rolled to within a few feet of the cup, as, far across the fairways, the river began to flow again in the sunlight, catching it and sending it back in sharp, dazzling beams of light. That is magnificent. I find golf to be incredibly boring, and I still think that was a magnificent paragraph. I hope the whole novel isn't about golf. And the other one I bought to celebrate Trump's defeat, as much as Biden's win, was much more of a radical political book. Harry Kunzru's Red Pill. It's his latest. I absolutely loved his White Tears. Look at that. And look at those end papers. And I was so glad that the bookstore had the hardcover from the UK edition, because I like their cover far better than the American, even though I don't love the eyes thing, but I hated the other one. About a Brooklyn writer who leaves his young family to take up a 3-month residency at some place. Is it a writing retreat? At Berlin's Lake Wannsee. I guess in Germany. Okay. He's a very interesting writer. Opening a few lines. I think it is possible to track the onset of middle age exactly. It is the moment when you examine your life, and instead of a field of possibility opening out, an increase in scope, you have a sense of waking from sleep or being washed up on shore, newly conscious of your surroundings. So this is where I am, you say to yourself. This is what I have become. That's a little depressing. The story of how I found out about this book isn't very interesting, but I found out about it, I ordered it, and here it is. It's a gay novella called Pete's Underpants by Bertie Marshall, by the Dostoevsky wannabe publishing house. And I'm going to be doing some kind of a collaboration, buddy read something or other, on this book with Dan of the Weird Book Club, because it just seemed like a book crying out for Dan and I to address our minds to. There's no description on the back. I believe it's about kind of obsessive love or some kind of a love story. Bertie Marshall, born in Greenwich, London in 1960. regular viewers of my videos will know that I'm always on the lookout for some readable, literarily satisfying literature from Zimbabwe. So in hopes of that, I picked up this novel, Zenzele, A Letter from My Daughter by Nozipo Maraire. I'm assuming it's fiction, and it's in the form of letters from a Zimbabwean mother to her beloved daughter, a student at Harvard. It's a novel. Okay. I look forward to checking it out. Another one from the British Library Women Writers series. Just these gorgeously reprinted novels by women of the mid-20th century. Father by Elizabeth von Arnim. I have never read anything by von Arnim. Von Arnim died in 1941. She was born in Australia. Married a German guy. Settled in Berlin. Separated from her husband. Then married a British guy. The older brother of Bertrand Russell. I didn't know any of this. Best remembered for The Enchanted April. And this is about a woman who, after looking after her widower father until his remarriage, finds herself at the age of 33 with a chance to lead an independent life. A few weeks ago, I read Kwei's second novel for adults, Vivek Oji, The Death of Vivek Oji, is that what it was called? Didn't like the novel at all. I was very disappointed in it. But in that novel, in the early section of that novel, when I was still really enjoying it, references made to this African novel, so I promptly ordered it. And that novel is The Beautiful Ones Are Not Yet Born by Kwei Armah. Look at the spelling of beautiful. That is intentional. Look at that cover. And I don't remember exactly why it was mentioned, but this is a Ghanaian writer. Armah was born in Ghana in 1939, and this novel was published in 1968. I love the cover. Another work of Western Canadian history related to the Indigenous peoples, Lost Harvests, Prairie Indian Reserve Farmers and Government Policy by Sarah Carter. This is very specific to Western Canada. I don't know that anybody who isn't interested in Indigenous history and Western Canadian history is going to be interested in it, but I'm very much becoming more and more interested in it. And this work of history, this is the second edition, published, the first edition 1990, this one 2019. Oh, okay, so this one is like a full 29 years later or something. I can't do the math. But anyway, one of the things about the treaties that the Canadian government signed and then promptly ignored with the Indigenous tribes in Western Canada was that the government would help the people, the Indigenous people, start farming on their reserves, and they didn't help. They gave bare bones help, but mostly just ignored that provision in the treaty. This is a history of those attempts of the people on the Indian reserves, that's the historical term, the Indigenous peoples who were forced onto the reserves, their efforts to start farming and the way that the government thwarted their efforts. So I need to know this stuff, and it's a nice cover, and I don't know that very many people on my channel are going to be interested in my review of it, but I'm looking forward to reading it next year, 2021. Hello, well, here is an addendum filmed all these months later on April 29th, 2021. The first part I filmed way back November 28th, 2020. I'm way behind on my book haul, editing my book haul videos, because I have bought so many books since the pandemic. But this happens when I get around to editing it this much later. Inevitably, I have read and reviewed quite a few books or started and bailed on the books, and there's no sense in doing a book haul for books that you've already heard me finish with. So almost half of this video became obsolete, so here I am with an addendum of some very current acquisitions. The first chunk are books that I got from the last remaining used English language used bookstore in Tokyo, Infinity Books, and they are teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. So there was an urgent Facebook post that went out, and I went onto their website and ordered 5 books that were delivered to me, and these are them. As a way of helping them out. I often used to go there and trade books in, but the poor guy, he needs help, so I just bought them outright, and they're books that looked interesting to me. So I did my good deed, and I got 5 new, to me, books, and here they are. First is this will be my second try with a Yasunari Kawabata novel, Beauty and Sadness. I didn't know anything about it, it was there in stock and very cheap. This one is translated by Howard Hibbett, and I believe the English edition is copyright 1975, the original 1961, and it's about a grave penitent man named Oki, which means big in Japanese, who returns to Kyoto to face a haunting obsession from his past. That sounds very Kawabata-esque. I'm going to give Kawabata at least one more try. Cousin of Always Doing, I believe, put this on my radar. Cousin and I, Buddy, read this author's novella, and her wartime short stories, published by Persephone Books, that publishes the dullest, ugliest books in God's creation, but this one actually has an illustration on the cover, so go Persephone! Good evening, Mrs. Craven, the wartime stories of Mollie Panter-Downes. And look at that. Like, this is what a real book cover should look like. None of this gray crap. Anyway, Mollie Panter-Downes, her novella One Fine Day, 1947. I liked it better than Cousin did. I didn't love it, but I liked it. I don't think Cousin liked it very much. In my memory, we have a joint review video that I'll put a link to. But I was interested in her writing, so these are obviously her wartime stories. Now, wait a minute. When they say stories, do they mean fiction or... Yeah, they're short stories. Okay. Because the opening paragraph of the first one, called Letter from London, it sounds like nonfiction. It sounds like memoir or something, but apparently it's not. Although I'm not actually sure, but it's a great first paragraph. So the first story in this collection, whether it's journalism or fiction, I don't know, but it's Letter from London, 3rd of September, 1939. And here's the opening paragraph. For a week, everybody in London had been saying every day that if there wasn't a war tomorrow, there wouldn't be a war. Yesterday, people were saying that if there wasn't a war today, it would be a bloody shame. Now that there is a war, the English, slow to start, have already in spirit started and are comfortably 2 laps ahead of the official war machine, which has to await the drop of somebody's handkerchief. In the general opinion, Hitler has got it coming to him. Juan of Just One Reader has put the gay writer Ethan Mordden back on my radar, and because of that, and this is not, I don't think Juan reviewed this collection of short stories, which may be his fictional debut, I'm not sure, but I believe I've read it before, or at least had it on my shelf. But whichever one it is, I want to read it again, hearing Juan talk about it. I believe he has read Ethan Morden's opera journalism, which doesn't interest me in the slightest, and another collection of linked short stories, or was it a novel? Buddies. But this one I think is earlier, and this is I've a Feeling We're Not in Kansas Anymore, Tales from Gay Manhattan by Ethan Mordden. Look at that 1970s cover. And I think I had this exact edition on my shelf, but this was a nice used copy that who knows, I might even get to for Pride Month coming soon. I think I read Buddies, and I remember liking it. He wrote a really doorstopper of a novel in the early days of my coming out, like maybe early 90s, late 80s, that I had a copy of on my shelf, and I don't think I ever got to it, but this is one of his earlier works. Murakami Haruki, The Elephant Vanishes, short stories. Now, I don't like Murakami's short stories that are really recent, but this is much earlier. Translated from the Japanese by Alfred Birnbaum and J. Rubin. 1993, I believe, is the English translation. I bought this solely because there's a story in here, and I believe it's the story called Sleep, but I won't swear to that. Let's find that. The contemporary Japanese novelist Mieko Kawakami, author of Breasts and Eggs, did an onstage interview with Murakami, who she credits as being kind of her inspiration, her mentor, but she also takes him very publicly to task for some of his portrayals of women. It's a fascinating interview. Translation is on Literary LitHub. I'll put a link in the show notes. And in that, it was such a fabulously nuanced conversation, because she did confront him about certain aspects of the way that he portrays women, but later in the interview she says that his short story, yes, I was right, Sleep, which is collected in this collection, The Elephant Vanishes. It's written from a woman's perspective, and Mieko Kawakami says that she's never encountered such a powerful portrayal of a woman in fiction. by a female author or a male author as in that story. She says it's an extraordinary achievement. So that just makes me want to read the story. And I was talking about this with Lindy on a Zoom chat last year, and so we have agreed that we are going to read the story and talk about it on Zoom in the coming weeks or months. So that's why I got this, but I like his earlier short stories. The recent short stories I've read by him, they're so desiccated and just not uninteresting to me. I bailed on his... Well, he has a new collection of short fiction, which I have no intention of even trying, but the one that came out about 3 years ago, I bailed very early on. It was just stupid, but earlier stuff I'm still here for. I have read one collection of short stories by the Irish author Bernard MacLaverty, and this is his Booker-nominated, Booker-shortlisted novel, Grace Notes. It's a little bit of a banged-up copy. Look at how old that old price tag is, but anyway, it was like $5 or something. If I end up loving this book, I'm going to get rid of this kind of ugly, well-worn... I mean, it's otherwise good, but it's got... Like, that's a stain. I didn't notice because I've hardly looked at it. And then there's a little bit of a stain there and that kind of stuff. If I had looked at it in the store, I would not have bought it. Anyway, 1997. It's a portrait of a woman composer. Has anybody out there tried it? And then the last part of this book haul will be a bunch of books that were a birthday present to me, speaking of Lindy, for my birthday this year from Lindy. And she sent them slow boat, which was good. It took them a long time to arrive, and it was a lovely surprise when they did. She has 4 very eclectic choices. One that I was expecting, because she told me she had set it aside for me, but the others were complete surprises. So I'll start with the one that I knew was coming, and that is the latest work of fiction by the Western Canadian author Sharon Butala, Season of Fury and Wonder, and these are short stories. Fabulous cover, just came out maybe last year. I remember that each story in here pays tribute to one of Butala's favorite short stories by writers such as Raymond Carver, Flannery O'Connor, James Joyce, Anton Chekhov, so not Canadian writers. But Lindy said you absolutely do not need to be familiar with or read the other short story to enjoy her story. So I will just read them as is, probably. Sharon Butala, one of her very early novels my buddy read with Britta. It's called Luna, and I'll put a link to my review of that. And I don't think I've ever read any of her short stories, and this is her most recent collection. Thank you, Lindy. The first story is entitled What Else We Talk About When We Talk About Love, which is in homage to the famous Raymond Carver story. And here is the opening paragraph, which packs quite a punch. When my sister Jamie's husband was close to death, I went to the city where they lived to see him. My 3 brothers and 2 other sisters and I had been emailing each other for some time, occasionally phoning. We are too old, the bunch of us, to text or tweet or whatever. We find these methods of communication insulting. So when their 2 diagnoses of cancer finally came, none of us was surprised. A collective silence held across the provinces in our different houses, each of us looking out our windows at our own landscapes, city, ocean, forest, each of us trying desperately to think, as if thinking could solve what wasn't even properly a problem, or that we might thereby enter a new dimension where the news would be ordinary and reasonable, and out of which we could decide how to behave and what attitude to take that would be natural and obvious. And now I'm hoping that Invisible Cities, before the year is out, will choose New Zealand as one of their countries, because she has gifted me a very interesting-looking anthology of short fiction from New Zealand. Lost in Translation, New Zealand Stories, edited by Marco Sonzogni. I have never heard of this anthology. It's a beautifully put-together book, and it was published in 2010. The fiction of Arundhati Roy has been hit and miss for me. I really loved her most recent novel, Something Something Utmost Happiness, but hated her debut novel that won the Booker. Ugh. But here is a collection of some of her nonfiction, which I've never read. Azadi, Freedom, Fascism, Fiction. She is apparently very incisive, very radical in her political thinking, and I think I need more of that in my life. And this was just published last year. Here is the lovely lino-cut print card that Lindy made, in which she's got a lovely personal message for me in it. I may not share more than the title of the first essay, but the title of the first essay is, In What Language Does Rain Fall Over Tormented Cities? The Weather Underground in the Ministry of Utmost Happiness. So that's the full title that I blanked on. The Ministry of Utmost Happiness. And the one that I hated, her first one, is The God of Small Things. Yeah, I think the title is enough of a tease, don't you? And finally, this is a collection of queer short stories by a Taiwanese-Canadian Chi Ying Lei, Homesickness, translated from the Mandarin by Daryl Stirk. I remember when Lindy read this, so now I have her copy. I am just delighted. Chi Ying Lei came to Canada in 2008, born in Taipei, did a PhD in microbiology at McGill, has written a novel in Mandarin called The Ideal Family, and another collection of short stories called The Comical Lives of Losers. I wonder if either of those have been translated. I will find out. Lindy will tell me if I ask her nicely. It goes without saying, I'm looking forward to giving this a try. So that is the addendum, which is probably as long as the first part, after all of the excisions. Thanks for watching.